Hello, boys and girls. I'm totally overwhelmed by the fact that I'm having this sequencer in my studio. ELOQUENCER by WINTER MODULAR. This is by far the best sequencer I have encountered in my whole career in Eurorack format. Not only because of the firepower it offers, but first of all by the simplicity and intuitive interface. This seems like developers of these sequencers have taken all of the best features from other sequencers, from Electron stuff, from some classical 303 Xox boxes, and put it together into one simple and hands-on sequencer. The result is simply astonishing. When I encountered it, I was really afraid that I will have to do a lot of reading through the manual. In fact, it was just the opposite. The only thing I did, I watched the tutorial on Winter Modular site, and that's it. Basically, all the other stuff I figured on my own. I just maybe have to check twice or three times for some more advanced options. There's no menu diving. Everything is right in front of you and just one button press away. There are some layers and some other functions that you can access, but it's just 2 or 3 button presses, and these functions are not as vital and you are not using them so often. So for all the live sequencing and playing music, it's right there. Let's start by explaining what I did at the beginning of this video. I was sequencing 8 different instruments, all from ELOQUENCER. Briefly, I was sequencing a Boomstar, Bang, Erica synth voice, DPO, and a bass drum, mutant snare, and rimshot by Hex Inverter. And I have also modulated some parameters on those modules. Let me explain what the whole thing is about. It is an 8-track sequencer that allows you for simultaneous sequencing of gate and CV on each track. So we have, as you can see here, a separate gate and CV output for each of the 8 tracks, which are located here. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. 8 tracks. Here also, with those buttons on the right, you choose the tracks you want to edit. So when I press A, I'm editing the A track. As you can see, as I press the buttons here, the 2 rows of 8 buttons are changing its content. That's because they reflect the pattern that I have inputted here. The pattern is also reflected in this matrix in the middle. This is the bird's eye view of the whole pattern of all the 8 tracks. So the rows represent each sequencing line, while the columns represent steps. So we have 16 steps and 8 tracks. Now the 16 steps, that's the basic length of each of the tracks. It could have from 1 to 64 actually steps using parts and song mode, but more on that later. But the basic length is 16 steps. And within those basic 16 steps, you can set each of the tracks to have, length from, let's say, 2 to 16, or like from 3 to 5. So it can not only have a different length of each of the tracks, but different start and ending point, which is really, really cool. That's where we choose tracks. That's where we edit the tracks, and up here we have 4 really important buttons that let you decide which parameter exactly you will be editing. So we have CV, we have gate for editing, gate length, and ratcheting. Now these are the 4 basic layers that we can sequence. They do offer more layers sequencing, but more on that later. Let's stick to the interface. On the left side we have an OLED display that shows you all the parameters that you are editing, some CV values, gate length, probability settings, options, and all the other stuff. Up here you have SD card slot that allows you to save all your work. So when you power on your system again, it will be there. Besides that, up here we have an encoder which works really similarly to how the encoders on Electron sequencers work. So you can fine-tune your parameters, or you can go in larger increments while pushing and twisting the knob, and also push the knob for accepting your choices. Up here we have some of CV inputs and outputs. You have 2 CV inputs. You can change some parameters of the sequencer with external signals. You decide about that in the options menu. You also have reset and external clock, so this can be synchronized to external sequencer, for example, or some clock. You also have some auxiliary output right here, so you can actually output some of the values to the other sequencers, and you have a clock that you can send out. This clock is really neat because it has a built-in divider and multiplier. Instead of explaining each function step by step, let's just maybe construct a bit from scratch, and I will just explain what I'm doing. And this brings us to a function button right here, which is also really important. This function button allows you to access some secondary functions that you can achieve with holding the function button and pressing one of the step buttons. And you can see that right here there are different options appearing that I can change. But for now, we would like to clear the whole thing. And depending on where you are in the sequencer, in the menu, it will clear different things. Now we want to clear the whole pattern. Just press and hold function, go to the pattern right here, and again press function and clear, which is here, and sequencer asks us if we want to clear the whole pattern. We confirm it with pressing of the encoder, and you can see the matrix is cleared, so we have a fresh starting point. Let's choose track number 1, gate for sequencing gates, and let's input some steps. Easy. Let's say we would now like to edit gate length. What we could do, we could edit the gate length on the whole track or per step, and actually you can do that for most of the parameters. You can sequence them at the whole track level or per step. If you would like to adjust the gate length per whole track, you would just press and hold this track and adjust the knob. Okay? So we have a different gate length. Now we could also do that on a step level. For that, you would do that just like you would do this on any electron, for example, sequencer. Press and hold that step and adjust the value. So it's different gate length on different step. We could also tie gates. So the gate stays open till the next gate. And it's really simple. You just press and hold the gate, and you can see that a little line appears above that step, and it will just last until the next gate. You get rid of this tie the same way. Press and hold for more than half of the second. Now let's say I would like to adjust the CV of this instrument. So I press and hold the track if I want to adjust note for the whole track, or I can do it per step, just like with the gates. But now notice that when I press CV repeatedly, I get different LED colors. See, that's because you can sequence 3 layers per each mode. So if it's red, I'm just sequencing the basic layer, which is CV. So for example, in my case, I'm sequencing 1 volt per octave, but it's just a CV value. Now if I press it again, it becomes green, meaning that I will now sequence randomness of the CV. So for example, if I want to randomize the whole track, I'll just press track, and as you can hear, it randomizes the whole track. Now if I press it again, I will randomize the range of the whole track. Okay? So you can hear the range is bigger, from really low notes to some high notes. And I can of course do that like with all the other parameters per step. Awesome, right? So we have this 3-layer sequencing for all of the functions except gate, which only gives you probability and the basic sequencing without the range. Now let's see some other modes. Let's input some simple 4-on-4 kick drum. Let's make it more dynamic. I enter the ratcheting mode, and per step, we're gonna input some ratcheting stuff here. So let's say I would like to ratchet this step. I press it, and I switch different ratcheting types, which appear right here. Well, nothing happens. Why? That's because we have to switch to probability, green, and set the probability of this ratcheting for that step. Now we can see it's all zeroed, so I have to press it. Okay, and each time this step will occur, it will ratchet. But of course, we could set it to some lower values, so it ratchets just some of the times. And with the orange layer, we could set the ratcheting type probability. That's it for the basic editing. You choose a track, you choose what to edit, you choose which layer to edit with each of the button presses, and you choose your steps here. There's more to it because you can also sequence stuff with live recording. You don't have to step edit it. You just have to press function and this button right here, live recording, and you can see that those steps change into a keyboard. So it's just like a standard keyboard, and I can play with it and record some stuff. If I don't like what I recorded, I just press and hold it and it will erase it. There are some different modes, like for example free play mode, and you change them here. So if I press free play mode, I can play and try out my pattern without recording it. If I want to record it, I switch to CV key record and just record it. It will quantize it. Now, I have constructed some, simple pattern, but it's kind of boring because it just goes the same way forward and that's it. But you can have those sequencing lines playing in different directions, and you access them by pressing function and step mode right here. For default setting, we have all tracks enabled, and you can see here they are all enabled, all red. So when I change the play mode, for example for backwards, you can see both of my lines are playing backwards now. I can also set them to pendulum, some randomness, and all different stuff. If I would like to change just certain tracks, I will have to disable all the other tracks. And for example, right now only the third track will be affected by different play mode. I can also change track length of each of the tracks. I press function and track length right here. First I select the track, let's say track number 4. Now I press and hold the step that I wish to be my starting point, let's say number 4. And then holding this button, I press the end of my sequence, let's say number 14. So now as you can see, my bass drum travels only from step number 4 to 14. And you can do that per each track. You can also shuffle tracks, function and shuffle, and here you apply depth of the shuffle. You can also shift tracks by pressing function and shift. This works on the same principle as track modes. So as a default, you have all the tracks selected, so when I move the knob left or right, it will shift all of the tracks. But I can of course move just one of the tracks or just some of them. You just need to select or deselect them here. Really easy, right? I can also randomize the whole thing, and you press function plus randomize. Then you choose what parameters and what tracks you would like to randomize right here, for example, because you might not want to randomize all of the parameters. And here you choose if you want to randomize only the first basic layer or all of the layers. So as you can hear, each time I press the randomization, it will give me different results. Now there is a good time to present you with the freeze and revert function, which could be a lifesaver during some live performances. Let's say we make a beat that we really like, simple beat that will just be there. This is our starting point, our home base. That's where we would like to revert to when things get funky. Okay, no, when I press function and freeze, a sequencer will let me know that the pattern has been frozen. Now, for example, if I would like to randomize this pattern and get crazy with that, and let's say randomize the whole thing, for some reason I might not like that and I would like to revert to my home base, I would just press function and revert, and this gets me back to where I have frozen my pattern. Very, very useful, especially during live performance. And you can of course save a preset and just go back to, you know, your saved basic preset, but that is just faster and more intuitive. Speaking of preset, if you hold function and press and hold this button right here, you are getting into a pattern menu. You can see I have now chosen preset number A1, and in this mode, this is where you choose your next preset. These buttons become presets, and track buttons become preset banks. So if I press, for example, this button, it's a B and B2. There's nothing stored here, so there's no sound. If I want to go back to A1, I press A and the first button here, and I'm back in my preset A1. I can duplicate presets, which is really cool because it will duplicate what you just have done and save it to the next free preset slot. So now if I press function and press and hold duplicate, it told me that I just duplicated the pattern and it copied it to the next available pattern, which is A5, and it switched to that pattern. So it's super easy. Of course, there are some more options here, but I'm not able to cover all of them. Hopefully I will do some more videos on that. But there's one more option that you need to be aware of. This is very important. This is called a master track. With all the different track lengths and playing modes, it's really easy to make some polyrhythms and some interesting patterns, but at the same time those patterns will not synchronize, and at some point you might want to synchronize all of the patterns starting and ending at different points at the same point. So for example, you might want to resync all of them so they play from step number 1 after 32 steps or 64 steps, and you decide on that feature by pressing function and clock right here. Now if you scroll down, you get this master track, which could be internal, or you can choose any of the tracks to be the master track. And you can choose whether all of the tracks obey to the master track or they do not obey, which may also be interesting. For starting point, it is best to just set it to internal. So it's sort of like a virtual internal master track that will make all of the other tracks listen to it. And here you set the pattern length. It's set to 16, that's the basic level, but when you're doing some more advanced polyrhythmic stuff, it's really cool to set it to 32 or 64 steps. So you get this evolving sequence, which is not predictable and polyrhythmical, but at some point it will resynchronize, making the whole groove breathe. One more thing I did not mention, there are also scales available for you to choose for the CV output. So if you want to quantize it to different scales, you just press function and scale, and that's where you can choose the root and the type of the scale. And there's one more last thing to mention. Although ELOQUENCER is currently a beast of a sequencer, it is still developed, and developers are telling us about some new different functions, so you will get some more features with future updates. So to summarize it, I don't see any other competition for ELOQUENCER. It has all the options you could have wished for. It's super intuitive, design is slick and beautiful. It might just be the one and only sequencer that you might need in your system. Now, I know I have said it before, but with this one, you really have to try it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. And as usual, if you like it, if you found that video useful, please subscribe and spread the good word. Bye-bye. Happy New Year.